The cold hum of the Sovereign's engines vibrated through Captain Clara Rhee's bones as she stood at the front of the bridge, gazing out into the endless black. A projection of Earth filled the main display, a beautiful, blue marble that now seemed like a distant memory. She tried to focus on the familiar features of the planet, Mount Everest's peak, the vast oceans, the swirling clouds, but all she could see was the looming threat of extinction. The Tzrihn were coming. And Earth was next. "Captain, we've lost another one," came the calm, yet strained voice of Lieutenant Erickson, her second in command. He stood next to her, his face pale as the report came in. "Another colony?" Clara asked, not turning to face him. She already knew the answer. It was the same every day, another human settlement wiped from existence, another 100,000 lives reduced to nothing. The Tzrihn didn't just conquer, they exterminated. "Yes." Sala 7. Erickson's voice trembled. "The entire population, gone." Clara's jaw tightened. It wasn't the first report, and it wouldn't be the last. The Tzrihn had proven ruthless, their genocide an unstoppable tide that had consumed every colony in its path. And now, their fleets were bearing down on Earth. She clenched her fists. The orders from UEF Command were clear: resist with diplomacy, counter their forces when possible, but always uphold the Federation's values. But Clara knew, deep down, those values were becoming a liability. Diplomacy was a dream in a galaxy of nightmares. She turned to Erickson, her voice low, steady, but cutting through the tension on the bridge. "I'm done with diplomacy." Erickson blinked, clearly startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean we stop hoping they'll listen to reason," she replied. "We can't negotiate with monsters." Erickson opened his mouth but paused, considering her words carefully. He had always been the one to cling to hope, to believe that civility could win out in the end. But even he couldn't deny the truth anymore. Just then, a communications officer interrupted. "Captain, a priority message from UEF Command." Clara stepped forward, brushing a lock of dark hair from her face. "Put it through," she ordered. The main screen flickered, and the stern face of Admiral Tzrihn appeared, her sharp eyes flickering with barely contained frustration. "Captain Rhee, I don't need to tell you how critical this situation is. Earth's defenses are holding, but we've received word from our scouts. The Tzrihn fleet has amassed near the outer rim. They're coming for us." Admiral Thrhn's words were clipped. "We can't waste time. We need to intercept their fleet before they reach our doorstep." Clara felt her pulse quicken. Earth was the last stronghold, her home, the cradle of humanity. If the Tzrihn breached it, nothing would remain. "Understood, Admiral," Clara said. Her voice remained composed, but inside, the pressure was building. Thrhn's expression softened, just slightly. "You know what this means. We're relying on you, Captain." Clara took a deep breath, her mind already racing through the necessary steps. "We'll make it happen." Sovereign out. The communication cut off, and she turned back to Erickson. "Set course for the outer rim. All hands, prepare for battle." The officers moved quickly, the atmosphere on the bridge shifting from tense to action-oriented. Clara's heart pounded as the Sovereign's engines roared to life. She thought of Earth again, now an increasingly fragile jewel in the blackness of space, and her resolve hardened. Hours later, the Sovereign emerged from hyperspace into the deep void of the outer rim. The stars glittered in sharp contrast to the haunting emptiness that surrounded them. The fleet had barely arrived when the first reports came in, Tzrihn ships detected, scattered in small formations, but advancing toward the heart of the system. "Captain, we're in range of their vanguard," Erickson called out. "Should we engage?" Clara nodded without hesitation. "No more waiting. Engage immediately." The order was transmitted, and the Sovereign lurched forward into the fray. The Tzrihn fleet wasn't large, but their ships were unlike anything humanity had encountered before, sleek, obsidian-hulled, and covered in barbed spikes that seemed to drink in the light. Their weapons, capable of obliterating a city with a single shot, flared to life, and the first volley of plasma streaked toward the Sovereign. Clara gripped the arms of her command chair as the ship shuddered from the blast. "Shields holding," shouted her tactical officer, but the crackle of damaged systems filled the air. "Return fire," Clara barked. The Sovereign's weapon systems lit up. Blue bolts of energy streaked across the void, slamming into the Tzrihn ships. They retaliated with a vengeance, their weapons carving through space with terrifying precision. Clara's hands flew over the controls, her mind sharp and focused as she guided the ship through the storm of fire. She didn't think, she reacted, the experience of countless battles flowing through her. The first Tzrihn ship exploded in a dazzling array of lights, the shockwave rattling the Sovereign. "One down," Erickson reported, voice tight. But Clara didn't celebrate. One ship wasn't enough. The Tzrihn had more, many more. She knew they wouldn't stop at just a few skirmishes. The full fleet was waiting, and they wouldn't hesitate to burn everything in their path. As the battle raged on, Clara's mind shifted. Every moment she spent trying to preserve the ideals of the UEF felt like a waste of time. The Tzrihn didn't care about talks or treaties. They cared only for destruction. "Captain," Erickson said, his voice quieter now, "we've got another wave coming in." Clara looked up at the screen, her eyes narrowing. More ships. A lot more. And this time, they were close enough that the Sovereign couldn't avoid the onslaught. She made a decision. "All ships, prepare for full assault." "No holds barred," Clara ordered, her voice cold. "We fight to win, not to survive." The crew exchanged uncertain looks, but they obeyed. In the heat of the moment, as the Sovereign streaked through the void, weapons blazing, Clara felt a change in her, something hardening, like a rock forming in her chest. She had always believed in diplomacy, in preserving the humanity of the Federation. But now, the price of survival was becoming clearer. No more. She glanced once more at Earth on the display, its fragile beauty almost mocking her. Now we stop being civilized, she thought. The Tzrihn wouldn't know what hit them. The Sovereign cut through the void, its massive engines humming with purpose as Clara Rhee watched the star streaks of hyperspace blur into nothingness. Her hands were steady on the command console, but beneath the calm exterior, her thoughts were a storm. The battle with the Tzrihn had been brutal, though they had won, it felt like a hollow victory. They had fought, but they hadn't stopped the inevitable. "Captain, we're approaching the Tzrihn formation," Erickson's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood at his station, his face drawn with concern. Clara nodded without looking up. "Plot the course to intercept their reinforcements. We don't stop until they're all gone." Erickson hesitated for a moment. "Are we sure about this, Captain? We've just destroyed 2 Tzrihn ships. There's no telling how many more are out there." Clara's gaze met his for the briefest second. He was right, of course, there were always more. But that was the problem. The Tzrihn had shown no mercy, and now, neither could they. Mercy was weakness, and in this war, weakness was a death sentence. "I don't care if there's 1,000 more," Clara said, her voice low and cold. "We don't stop until they know we're not a target anymore." The crew fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Every person aboard the Sovereign knew what it meant. It was no longer a war for survival, it was a war for annihilation. They dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of a dark nebula, the distant light from a dying star casting a pale glow over the battlefield. Clara's eyes scanned the readouts. No less than 10 Tzrihn ships were scattered across their path, heavily armed, already on alert. The Sovereign wasn't alone. 3 smaller UEF destroyers flanked them, each one bristling with weaponry. But it was clear to Clara that they were outgunned. The Tzrihn ships were larger, faster, and more advanced. It wouldn't be a fair fight. "Captain," Lieutenant Lark, the tactical officer, called out, her voice tense. "We've got a full Tzrihn fleet approaching from the far side. They've initiated a formation. They're preparing to encircle us." Clara's lips thinned. "I see them. Prepare all weapons. No retreat. We break through, or we die trying." Erickson's voice was tight. "Are you sure about this?" We're outnumbered at least 5-1, and their weapons. Shut up, Erickson, Clara snapped. We fight. We don't give them the satisfaction of surrender. The Sovereign lurched forward, followed by the other ships in formation. A volley of plasma erupted from the enemy fleet, illuminating the space around them with deadly precision. Clara's fingers moved over the controls, her mind locked in the rhythm of battle. The ship shook under the force of the first impact, but the shields held. Just return fire, she ordered, her voice sharp. Blue energy beams lanced from the Sovereign, striking one of the Tzrihn warship's dead center. The ship flickered briefly before detonating in a fiery explosion. One down. But the enemy didn't stop. Another barrage came, this time overwhelming their shields. The ship trembled, alarms blaring across the bridge. Shields failing at 23%, Lark reported, barely audible over the chaos. Hull integrity compromised. We need to fall back. No, Clara said, her tone unwavering. We hold position. We press the attack. Her fingers flew over the console, initiating a countermeasure sequence. A massive wave of electromagnetic pulses radiated from the Sovereign, disorienting the Tzrihn ships, but it wouldn't be enough to tip the scales. Not yet. Captain. Erickson's voice was frantic. Their flagship is coming into firing range. If we don't pull back now, we'll be destroyed. Clara's heart pounded, but her eyes were focused, unyielding. There is no pulling back. We've come this far. We fight to the end. She toggled the comms, speaking into the intercom. All ships, focus fire on the Tzrihn flagship. Take it down, or we die here. The Sovereign surged forward, a massive barrage of energy trailing behind it. The other UEF destroyers followed, firing in tandem. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to bend under the force of the weapons. The Tzrihn flagship flared as their shields flinched, but it held strong. Captain, Erickson said, his voice tight with frustration, it's not working. We need something bigger. We need to retreat and regroup. Clara was silent for a moment, then turned to face him, her eyes hard. We don't retreat. Before Erickson could respond, Lark shouted, Captain, there's a weak point on the flagship's starboard side. A blind spot in their armor. We can penetrate it if we hit it just right. Clara's lips curved into a grim smile. Set course for that blind spot. Full speed ahead. The Sovereign tore through space, dodging enemy fire. The Tzrihn flagship loomed closer, its sleek form radiating menace. Clara's heart raced, and her thoughts narrowed to a single point, the weak spot. One shot. Firing solution locked, Lark called. Ready when you are. Now, Clara said, and the Sovereign's main cannon unleashed its full fury. The beam tore through space, slamming into the flagship's exposed flank. The explosion was deafening, a violent eruption of fire and debris that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The flagship crumpled like paper under the blow, its massive structure breaking apart. The bridge crew erupted in cheers. But Clara wasn't celebrating. That's only one ship, she said, her voice cold and focused. We've only begun. In the aftermath of the battle, Clara stood in her quarters, staring out the observation window at the darkness beyond. The stars had never seemed so distant. She could hear the muffled voices of her crew outside, but inside, there was only the crushing weight of what she had ordered. The Tzrihn flagship's destruction had been a victory, but at what cost? The Sovereign was damaged, and 3 of the smaller destroyers were barely holding together. Yet the Tzrihn had only been slowed. The war was far from over. Clara's comm chirped. She picked it up without hesitation. Captain, it's Admiral Tzrihn, came the voice through the line. We've received your report. Impressive, but you've stirred up a hornet's nest. We've detected a massive Tzrihn fleet, larger than anything we've faced so far. They're coming for Earth. Clara's gaze hardened. She had known this moment would come. The Tzrihn wouldn't stop until humanity was crushed. But now, they had no choice but to fight. And this time, there would be no negotiation. Tell command, she said, her voice calm despite the fire burning inside her. We don't have time to wait. We need every ship ready. Earth's next. We fight to win. Her words hung in the air, cold and unyielding. This was no longer just a war, it was humanity's last stand. And Clara Rhee was ready to lead it, no matter what the cost. The deep black of space stretched out endlessly beyond the observation window, the silent void betraying nothing of the storm that was coming. Clara Rhee stood before the viewport of the Sovereign, her hands clasped behind her back, her mind already calculating the battle to come. She could see Earth below, fragile and vulnerable, a lone blue orb surrounded by a vast, indifferent universe. The Tzrihn were coming. And this time, there would be no retreat. Captain, Lieutenant Ericsson's voice broke her reverie, his face as pale as the stars outside. We've received reports from the fleet. The Tzrihn have amassed a full armada, at least 50 warships. They'll be in orbit within 6 hours. Clara didn't look at him. Are we ready? Not completely, Ericsson replied, his tone strained. The Sovereign has sustained heavy damage, and several ships in the fleet are in no condition to fight. But we've mobilized every available vessel. Earth's defenses are preparing for the worst. Clara nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on Earth. We'll have to do it with what we've got. No second chances. She turned toward the tactical display, where a hologram of the solar system floated, a sea of data flickering across the screen. The Tzrihn's arrival had been detected far too late, now the odds were stacked impossibly high. Their fleet was far superior, but Clara didn't have the luxury of surrender. Earth's defenses had held the line for months, but the last hope lay with her, in her crew. We can't win a conventional battle, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. We'll have to make them underestimate us. Captain? Ericsson asked, stepping closer. We fight asymmetrically, Clara said, her voice steady now. We'll turn their own tactics against them. We've spent too long playing their game. Time to change the rules. Ericsson's eyes narrowed in confusion. You're suggesting we ambush them? Clara's lips tightened into a thin smile, the first sign of something almost like hope. Not exactly. We'll bait them into attacking us head-on, then hit them where it hurts most. We use their size and overconfidence against them. If we force them into a choke point, their numbers will work against them. You want to pull them into the inner system, Ericsson realized. Where they can't maneuver. Exactly. We'll push them into Earth's gravity well and trap them. Ericsson swallowed hard, the weight of the plan sinking in. It's risky. If we miscalculate, we'll be sitting ducks. We don't have a choice, Clara replied, her voice firm. The Tzrihn never planned for us to fight like this. They think we're weak, let's show them how wrong they are. The Sovereign moved swiftly through the vast expanse of space, flanked by the remaining UEF ships. The mission was simple: lure the Tzrihn fleet into the inner system, use the gravity well of Earth to limit their movement, and strike when they least expected it. The plan had a 1 in a million chance of working, but at this point, it was all they had. Captain, we're approaching the asteroid belt, Lark, the tactical officer, called from her station. We can use the field to hide our movements for a while. Good, Clara said, adjusting the ship's course. Stay low. We want to be as invisible as possible until the last moment. The Sovereign moved stealthily between the asteroids, its engines throttled to the minimum. Every sensor was off, every light dimmed. It was a dance of shadows, moving in silence through the maze of rocks. The tension was palpable, the crew working in an eerie calm as they prepared for the coming storm. Captain, Ericsson said after a long pause, his voice quieter now, are you sure about this? You're asking us to risk everything, our lives, Earth's future, on a single chance. Clara met his gaze, her expression unreadable. We've already lost everything else, Ericsson. What's left to lose? His lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer. A soft ping came through the comms, interrupting the silence. Captain, Tzrihn fleet has been spotted, Lark reported. They've entered the outer system. They'll be in range of the asteroid belt within the hour. Clara's breath caught. Get ready. This is it. The next few minutes felt like hours as the Sovereign silently approached the edge of the asteroid belt, waiting. Every heartbeat was a countdown to their death or their salvation. Clara watched Earth's silhouette grow larger in the distance, the home they were all fighting for. The Tzrihn would be in range soon, too soon. Captain, they've entered the asteroid field, Lark reported again, her voice a mixture of determination and fear. They're following the same course we did. Clara stood from her command chair, her eyes hardening as the display showed the Tzrihn ships, their black silhouettes cutting through the asteroid belt like predators hunting their prey. They were too focused, too eager. They didn't know the trap was already set. All ships, execute Phase 1, Clara ordered. Move to position. The Sovereign rocketed forward, its engines flaring to life. The other UEF ships followed suit, emerging from behind the asteroids. For a moment, it was like a ghostly fleet, a terrifying image of ships appearing from the shadows, hidden until the final second. The Tzrihn ships responded too late. Before they could adjust their course, the Sovereign and the other UEF ships were already locking on their weapons. Firing! Lark shouted, and the main cannon of the Sovereign lit up the dark field with blinding blue energy. The first shot hit a Tzrihn destroyer dead-on, sending it spiraling into the abyss. The other UEF ships opened fire, striking with deadly precision. But the Tzrihn responded quickly, unleashing a torrent of fire that tore into the Sovereign's hull. The ship rocked under the force, alarms blaring as the shields weakened. Shields at 12%, Captain, Lark warned, her voice strained. Hull integrity is failing. Clara gritted her teeth. We hold, no matter what. The battle turned into chaos. Plasma fire exchanged between the two fleets, the black of space illuminated by explosions. The asteroid belt was alive with the flashes of energy, the remnants of shattered ships drifting in its wake. Then, a sudden shift. The Tzrihn flagship broke through the chaos, its massive form looming like a vengeful titan. It focused all its firepower on the Sovereign. Clara's heart skipped a beat, but her resolve didn't waver. All ships, focus fire on the flagship. Clara shouted. The Sovereign moved into position, dodging the deadly energy blasts from the flagship. With one final, desperate push, Clara ordered the main cannon to fire. The blast hit the Tzrihn flagship with devastating force. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The flagship staggered, its hull rupturing from the impact. Then, with a final shudder, it exploded, taking a portion of the Tzrihn fleet with it. Target destroyed, Lark announced, her voice a whisper of disbelief. But there was no time to celebrate. More Tzrihn ships were closing in. The fight wasn't over. We fight on, Clara said, her eyes cold as the stars outside. Earth's still standing. We keep it that way.